Okay, so let's take a first look at our churn data. We've got a pretty big data set here. We've got, looks like maybe about 20 different variables, and we've got 3,333 observations from memory. Yeah, 3,333 observations of people who either churn, that's a 1, or don't churn, a 0. So churning here is leaving our company, leaving our cell phone company. Okay, before we jump into logistic regression, let's see which variables are likely to be useful in our logistic regression model. So first we'll start with the categorical variables. If we go down here to describe table analysis, this is a good way to look at our categorical variables. So we'll select each of those: area code, international plan, and voicemail plan. And then churn as well. Over in tables, we're going to now define some tables. Let's put our variable that we're analyzing on the vertical, and churn on the horizontal here, and then define some new tables: voicemail plan, and churn, and international plan, and churn. Okay, we can run this. Now what we're going to be looking for is, does the rate of churn seem to change for different values of our categorical variables? So let's start up here with the area code. So we've got these three area codes: 408, 415, and 510. For the 408 area code, about 14.5% of our customers churn. For the 415 area code, about 14.25% of our customers churn. For the 510 area code, about 14.9% of our customers churn. These numbers are all really similar. So what this is telling me is that it looks like the rate of churn is essentially the same for each of these three area codes. What I can infer from that is the area code is not likely to be useful in predicting whether someone will churn. See, if you told me what area code they were from, all I would know from that is they had somewhere between a 14 and 15% chance of churning, and I wouldn't know any different value there depending on which area code you told me. Down here for voicemail plan though, we're going to see a slightly different story. So for people who don't have a voicemail plan, that's voicemail plan equals 0 here, we're seeing 16.7% of them churn. For people who do have a voicemail plan, we're seeing 8.5% of them churn. So we're almost twice as likely to churn if we don't have a voicemail plan as if we do have a voicemail plan. So this tells me that voicemail plan is a variable that I think is going to be useful for predicting churn. So what I like to do is keep a pen and paper on my desk, and I'm going to write down the voicemail plan as a variable that I think is likely to be useful, and then keep going to the next variable. Next one is international plan, and here we're going to see an even starker difference. For the people who don't have an international plan, 11.5% of them churned. For the people who do have an international plan, holy cow, 42% of them churned. Okay, so this is telling us it looks like we're much more likely to churn for some reason if we have an international plan. So we'll write down international plan then again as a variable that we think we're going to want to use. So now let's go back to our data, and we're going to look at our continuous variables now, our numerical variables. So again, describe summary statistics this time. We'll select all of our variables except the ones that we've already analyzed. These are our analysis variables, and put churn in as our classification variable. Under plots, let's add box and whisker plots. So box and whisker plots are really useful here for seeing visually what the difference in distribution of these numerical variables is between customers who churn and customers who don't. So this first table is not going to be very useful. I mean, you can go through and compare the mean account length of people who didn't churn and the mean account length of people who did churn, but I find it much easier to just do this graphically. Okay, so first one, this is account length, and what we're seeing is about the same distribution of account length for people who churn and people who don't churn. So account length does not look like it's going to be a useful variable for predicting whether a customer churns. But if we look down at our next graph, this is voicemail messages. We'd already identified having a voicemail plan as possibly being something that would be useful for predicting whether they would churn or not. Here we're seeing that the distribution of voicemail messages is higher in general for the people who don't churn than the people who do churn. So it looks like having a voicemail plan is associated with us being less likely to churn. Sorry, having many voicemail messages is associated with us being less likely to churn. So I would write down voicemail message as another variable that I think is likely to be useful. And then just keep going down here. Oh, here's a big one. Daytime minutes. So daytime minutes looks like it's got a really much higher mean for the people who churn than don't. Looks like daytime minutes might be useful, whereas down here, day calls, these distributions look about the same. The averages look about the same, and so on. So we could go through here, pick out the variables that seem to have different distributions for people who churn and people who don't, and note those down as variables that we think are likely to be useful in our model.